The sword and the stone of stars, the twin sons of planet Gravinox, burned low in the sky, casting long, golden shadows over the ancient ruins. For thousands of years, the sword had remained in the black stone, untouched, unmoved, and glowing faintly. Under the alien stars, no alien tribe could lift it, not the strong warriors of Chronox, not the psychic queens of Aluna, not even the giant war beasts of Sector 9. They all tried, and they all failed. The sword was known as Varixen, the star blade, and it was older than the stars themselves. It was said that the one who lifted it would gain the power to rule, destroy, or save the galaxy. But none knew who that one would be. A crowd of aliens stood around the sword now. As another ceremony began, a tall four-armed alien named Zorlok, covered in red battle armor, approached the stone. The drums beat, and the air grew thick with tension. He grunted, grabbed the hilt of the sword with all four hands, and pulled. Nothing happened. He roared and pulled harder, his muscles bulging, his feet cracking the stone beneath him. But still, the sword didn't move an inch. The crowd gasped and then sighed in another failure. Zorlok stepped back in shame, his head hanging low. "None are worthy," said the high priestess, her eyes glowing blue, the blade waits still. At that moment, a strange noise came from above, like a broken ship crashing through the atmosphere. Everyone looked up. A small escape pod blazed across the sky, smoke trailing behind it as it fell fast toward the ancient temple grounds. With a loud crash, it hit the earth just outside the stone ring. Guards ran toward it, weapons ready. The pod door opened slowly with a hiss, and a figure stumbled out, tall, pale-skinned, and wearing a burned-out spacesuit. A human, the crowd murmured. In surprise, humans were rare on Gravinox. Weak, soft, and unimportant. That's what most aliens believed about humans. But this one? He looked different, tired, confused, bleeding, but his eyes were steady. His name was Jack Carter, a ship mechanic from Earth who had been working on a trade ship nearby when something went wrong. One second he was fixing a fuel leak. The next, he was launched alone in an emergency pod. Now he stood in the middle of a sacred alien ground with dozens of eyes staring at him. What is this creature? One alien hissed, "Why is it here?" Another growled, "Kill it before it curses the temple," said an old warrior, raising his weapon. But before anyone could stop him, Jack looked at the sword. It pulled at him not with force, but with a strange feeling, like a memory that wasn't his. He stepped forward, slowly. Ignoring the shouts and threats around him, something inside him whispered, "Touch it." The aliens didn't move, shocked that this weak human was walking straight toward the sacred sword. Jack placed his hand on the hilt. It felt warm, almost alive. And then the sword began to glow brighter. A humming sound filled the air. Soft at first, then louder. The ground shook slightly, and a blue light wrapped around Jack's arm. Rising up to his shoulder, he gasped, but didn't let go. The alien stepped back in fear. The sword, it reacts to him. The priestess whispered, eyes wide, "He cannot be." Said another, "No, it's not possible." Jack took a deep breath and pulled. The sword moved just a little, but it moved. Dust rose from the cracks of the stone, and the humming grew louder. Every alien stared, frozen in shock. He released the sword quickly, his hand shaking. He hadn't pulled it all the way, but he had moved it, the first being in history to do so. Guards rushed forward and grabbed him, throwing him to the ground. "Stop him. He's cursed." One shouted, "No, he is the chosen one," said the priestess, standing still. Jack didn't fight back, still trying to understand what had just happened. As he lay on the ground, he looked up at the sword, now glowing brighter than ever, and in the back of his mind, a voice echoed softly, "You were not sent here by accident." The stars above flickered, as if watching, and far away in the darkness of space, Something ancient stirred from its long sleep. The sword had moved, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Jack Carter sat alone in the cold alien prison cell, his back against the wall. His hands were bruised, his face still dusty from the crash. He couldn't stop thinking about the sword, the glowing light, the strange energy, the way it moved when he touched it. It was like something deep inside the weapon had looked at him and recognized him. But how could that be? Outside the cell, alien voices echoed in a strange language. They argued loud and sharp. Some wanted Jack executed. Others wanted to study him. But one voice was calm and old. The High Priestess. She saw the sword react. Jack whispered to himself, "She knows something." The door creaked open slowly. A shadow entered, tall and thin, dressed in ancient red robes. But it wasn't the priestess. It was someone older. His skin pale and dry like sand, and his eyes glowing with quiet wisdom. He held a walking stick and moved slowly, but with purpose. "You are human," the old alien said in a soft voice, "and yet the blade listened to you." Jack stood up, surprised. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am called Volmir," he replied. "I once guarded the temple before it was forgotten." Jack looked at him carefully. "Then you know why it reacted to me?" Volmir nodded slowly. "There is a reason, but you are not ready to hear it fully." Jack frowned. "Why not?" "Because the blade chooses only when the time is right," Volmir said, "and it demands more than strength demands. Memory." Volmir stepped closer and handed Jack a small, strange stone. It pulsed faintly with blue light. "When you sleep," he said, "hold this in your hand. It will show you a piece of the truth." That night, as the moons of Gravenox rose high, Jack closed his eyes with the stone gripped tightly. At first, there was nothing, just darkness, but then the images came like dreams carved in fire. He saw a great war in the stars, ships crashing, planets burning, in the middle of it. A figure held the glowing sword, the same blade he had touched, but the figure wore strange armor and a helmet, hiding the face. Still, something in Jack's heart whispered, "That was me, or someone I was connected to." He woke with a gasp, sweat running down his face, the stone still glowing in his hand. The next morning, the guards took Jack from the prison. Not to punish him, but to face the council. He was brought to a large hall where many alien leaders sat in circles of stone, their faces hard and cold. The High Priestess stood in the center, her robes shining with silver threads. She raised her hand and spoke clearly. "The sword moved for him," she said. "That cannot be ignored." One warrior stood and growled, "It's a trick. A human cannot be worthy." Another elder shook his head. "No. The prophecy says the blade will choose a being from beyond the stars. One born far from war, but destined to carry it again." Jack stepped forward, nervous but calm. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I don't even know why it happened." The room fell silent. Then the priestess said, "Then go back and try again." Jack's eyes widened. "You want me to lift the sword?" She nodded. "The blade must answer a second time. Only then will we believe." Later that day, the temple ground was quiet but tense. The crowd was smaller, only council members and a few guards. Jack stepped up to the black stone again, the sword glowing faintly. He took a deep breath and placed his hand on the hilt. But this time, he didn't just pull, he listened. The hum returned deep and strong. The blue light wrapped around his arms again, brighter than before. He felt the sword's voice in his mind. Like wind through stars, it didn't speak in words, but in memories. Pain, loss, sacrifice, and something else, hope. He pulled. The sword rose higher this time, nearly halfway out of the stone. Gasps echoed from behind him. But suddenly a shout rang out from the trees beyond the temple, a bolt of red light. shot toward Jack, an assassin, dressed in black armor, launched from the shadows. Jack ducked instinctively, and without thinking, swung the half-reed sword. Though it wasn't fully out, it responded. Sending a shockwave through the air, the attacker was thrown back by a glowing wall of energy that pulsed around Jack like a shield. The ground cracked under his feet, the stone itself breaking slightly where the sword sat. The blade was awakening, and it was protecting him. Guards rushed to grab the assassin, who screamed, "The sword must not be freed. It will bring back the old war." The council members looked at each other, fear now in their eyes, not because Jack had failed, but because he had come too close to succeeding. The priestess stepped forward slowly, her face pale. "The blade has chosen him," she whispered, "and that means the past is not dead." Jack looked down at the sword, still glowing. He had more questions than answers. But now he knew one thing for sure. The sword had chosen him, and whatever came next, he was already a part of it. The sky turned a strange shade of green over the Gravenox horizon. Storms were coming not just in the air, but in the hearts of the aliens who had watched a human move the sacred sword. The temple guards argued, the council whispered behind closed doors, and the priestess kept silent. Only one thing was clear: Jack Carter could not be allowed to leave alive. But someone disagreed. Her name was Arca. She was half Elunian, with silver eyes and thin blue marks across her face. She was also the apprentice of the high priestess, but she didn't follow the rules. She believed in change, and in the old stories, ones that said the sword would return with a stranger from the stars. So when she saw Jack in the temple jail, again, she made her choice that night. While guards drank firemead under the twin moons, Arca crept through the shadows and disabled the security field with a stolen code crystal. Jack looked up from the floor, surprised to see her. "Don't speak," she whispered, handing him a dark cloak. "If you want to live, follow me." They slipped out through the lower temple passages. Past ancient statues and glowing vines, Jack didn't ask where she was taking him. He already knew the answer: the Forbidden Sector. It was a dead zone outside the city ruins, filled with collapsed machines from the last galactic war, broken ships and wild alien beasts that roamed freely. The energy fields there were unstable, which made tracking devices useless. No one ever went in. No one ever came out. But it was the only place where the temple guards would not follow. As they entered the rusted canyons of the sector, strange sounds echoed all around. Metal creaked, sparks fell from overhead cables, and strange creatures chirped deep in the mist. Jack held his breath as they passed the wreckage of a massive alien war tank, its gun still smoking after all these years. "How is this thing still warm?" he asked. "The ground remembers," Arca replied. "Some of these machines feed on energy. They're sleeping, not dead." They moved fast and silent through the maze of ruins, but Jack could feel something following them, not human, not alien. "Something else? What's that noise?" he asked. Stopping suddenly, Arca looked around, nervous. Then it came again, a clicking sound, like claws tapping metal. Out of the shadows, something large began to crawl over the broken wall. It was a Scythobista, six-legged predator made of living metal and bone. It had no eyes, only sensors across its body, and long, blade-like limbs that cut through stone like paper. It opened its jaws, revealing spinning teeth, and charged toward them. "Run!" Arca shouted. They darted through a narrow path, sliding under broken bridges and jumping over power coils. But the Scythobeast was fast, too fast. Jack tripped, falling hard onto the sharp ground. The beast leaped, aiming straight for his chest. In that moment, Jack raised his hand not to fight, but to shield himself. The sword wasn't in his hand, but something had changed inside him. His palm lit up, glowing with the same energy as the blade. A wave of blue force exploded from his skin, slamming into the Scythobeast midair. It crashed Into a wall, screeching in pain, metal body smoking. Jack stared at his hand in shock. What? What did I just do? Arca ran to him, helping him up the sword's power. It's inside you now. They didn't stop running until they reached an old bunker built deep into the canyon wall. Inside, it was quiet and full of strange machines and glowing screens. This was Arca's hidden place, a forgotten research. Sight left behind by the ancient alliance, she sealed the door behind them and turned on a small orb of light. Jack looked at her seriously. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. She hesitated, then sat down beside a console. "My brother once tried to lift the sword," she said, her voice low. "He believed in the prophecy, said it would bring peace to the galaxy. He never returned." Jack listened, silent. "I think the sword took his life. Or maybe it showed him the truth," she said. "Either way, I need to know why it chose you." Jack leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he said. "I saw memories. Battles. A man who looked like me holding that blade during a war that never existed in Earth's history." Arca stood, her eyes serious. "Maybe Earth's history was erased," she whispered. "Maybe. Your people were once part of the stars." Suddenly, the console beside them lit up red. A warning flashed in 3 languages: an identified ship approaching. Jack and Arca looked at each other. "They found us," she said. Jack's hand began to glow again, not by his will, but by the swords it wants us to fight, he said. His voice deeper now. Arca nodded, eyes narrowing. "Then let's give it a reason to keep choosing you." High above the planet Gravenox. Hidden behind the shattered moon, a black ship waited in silence. It had no markings, no lights, and no name. Inside its shadowy walls, the air was cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. This was no ordinary vessel. It belonged to him, the one the stars had forgotten. But the sword had not. They called him the Shadow Heir. He was once a guardian of the Swordsworn to protect its power for peace. But long ago, he chose another path. He watched from the bridge now. Eyes glowing red under a steel mask, a silent figure approached him and bowed. "My lord." "The sword has moved," the figure said. It responded to a human. The Shadow Heir turned slowly, the ship groaning around him, as if it feared its own master. "A human?" he whispered, voice like dust in a storm. The figure nodded, and dumb. "Not just any. The bloodline matches the last wielder." The Shadow Heir said nothing for a long time. Then he raised one hand, and a map of Gravenox appeared in the air, showing the temple, the forbidden sector, and a glowing dot. "Jack, send the Seekers," he ordered. "Alive, if possible. Dead if necessary. The blade must not awaken fully. Not again." Meanwhile, in the bunker deep inside the forbidden sector, Jack and Arca stood in front of a dusty wall covered in glowing carvings. Arca wiped away dirt, revealing an ancient mural. It showed a warrior half-human, half-Phalian lifting the sword in one hand, while behind him, galaxies burned. Jack stared at the figure, his chest tight. "That armor? It looks like what I saw in my dream," he said. Arca nodded slowly. "That's because it wasn't a dream." She pointed at a symbol above the warrior's head, a spiral of stars. "It means starborn, a warrior chosen across lifetimes." She said, "I think you were one of them before." Jack turned away, confused. "This makes no sense," he said. "I'm just an engineer from Earth. I fix broken pipes, not galaxies." Arca stepped closer. "But you're not just Jack Carter anymore. The sword is waking up your past, and your past is dangerous to those in power." Suddenly, the bunker lights blinked out, the screens turned black, and the temperature dropped. A cold whisper filled the air. "They found us," Jack said quietly. "BOOM." The wall exploded inward, sending metal and dust flying. Figures stepped through the smoke, tall, silent, wrapped in black armor. Their faces were hidden behind silver masks, and their hands glowed with red energy. The Seekers, servants of the Shadow Heir, trained to destroy anything touched by the sword. "Run!" Arca shouted, pulling Jack into a side tunnel. But the Seekers moved like ghosts, sliding through walls, phasing past doors. One of them appeared in front of Jack and raised a hand. A blast of red force shot toward him too fast to dodge. Jack raised his arm, and the blue energy of the sword flared from his palm. The blast hit a glowing shield that formed instantly. The two forces clashed, and the bunker shook. But Jack couldn't hold it. He hadn't mastered the power yet. The shield cracked, and the force threw him backward into the wall. Arca fought beside him with her electric spear, striking a Seeker in the chest. But they kept coming cold, quiet, unstoppable. Jack stood, bleeding from the mouth. "I can't fight like this," he said. "I don't know how." Arca grabbed his face and stared into his eyes. "Then stop trying to remember who you were, and become who you're meant to be now." With those words, she tossed him a small cube, same type of memory stone Volmir had given him. But this one pulsed with golden light. Jack gripped it, and images rushed into his mind faster. Sharper, deeper than before, he saw the final battle of the last age when the sword was used to seal away the Shadow Heir. He saw the warrior's face, this time his own face. He had been there once before, in a forgotten life, and he had died to keep the sword safe. Now, the sword had brought him back, not to remember, but to finish what was started. His body lit up with blue fire as the sword's power surged inside him. His wounds closed, and a soft humming surrounded him. When he opened his eyes, they glowed with the same energy as the blade. The Seekers paused, sensing the shift. Jack stepped forward and raised his hand. A wave of energy blasted outward, sending the black-armored enemies flying in every direction. The bunker began to collapse, and Arca pulled Jack through the exit tunnel. Behind them, the lab caved in, burying the Seekers under tons of metal and stone. Outside, they gasped for air, falling to the ground. Jack looked at his hands, still glowing softly. "I think the sword is fully inside me now," he said. Arca nodded, both shaken and amazed. "That means the Shadow Heir knows," she said. "He's coming next, far above, aboard the black ship." The Shadow Heir stood still. A faint smile appeared behind his steel mask. "The blade lives again," he whispered, and so the war begins. Jack Carter didn't sleep that night, not because he wasn't tired, but because every time he closed his eyes, the memories came back stronger, not dreams, not imagination, real memories. They didn't feel like stories told to him. They felt like stories he had lived. He saw himself walking through alien halls made of crystal. He wore armor that shimmered like starlight. And beside him walked beings of many kinds, some with wings, some with tails, some made of light itself. They called him by another name, a name he couldn't yet speak. But he knew one thing, clearly. He had been a warrior. And he had once held the same sword now burning in his soul. He opened his eyes in the shelter cave Arca had found after the escape. The walls glowed faintly from old power veins deep in the rock. Arca sat nearby, checking her weapons, her expression serious. She looked up when she noticed him awake. "You saw it again, didn't you?" she asked. Jack nodded slowly. "I saw me, but not me. Different clothes, different face, but it was me." Arca leaned closer. "You're remembering what the sword remembers. You're not just the chosen one now. You were the original wielder. The sword is just waking up your old self." Jack didn't respond. He walked to the edge of the cave and looked up at the stars. One of them flickered strangely like it was calling him. "Do you think Earth was part of this?" he asked quietly. "Part of the war?" Arca stood beside him, arms crossed. "I think Earth was once part of the Starborn Alliance. But someone erased your people's history, hid your past, probably to make sure the sword never found its way back to one of you. Jack felt a chill go down his back. Someone had cut Earth off from the stars on purpose. Who would do that? He asked. Arca replied with a whisper, the shadow heir. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a cracked crystal cube. This holds records from before the last war, she said. Jack took it in his hand, and the moment he touched it, the cube lit up. A figure appeared, a hologram of an old alien general with heavy armor and tired eyes. This message is for the last starborn. The general said, if you're seeing this, the sword has found you again, and that means the shadow heir has survived. He will rise again, just like you, and only the one who once defeated him can do it again. The message ended. Jack stood frozen, the cube still glowing in his hand. So it's true, he said. I didn't just inherit the sword's power, was the last one to use it. I died fighting him. Before Arca could respond, a deep rumble shook the cave. The ground cracked slightly, and loose stones fell from the ceiling. They rushed outside and froze in the sky above. A black eclipse had appeared, not natural, not normal. A ship, the Shadow Heir's warship, had entered the atmosphere. It blotted out the stars, and dark clouds began to spiral around it. Lightning cracked through the sky, but it wasn't normal. Lightning, it was red. The same energy the Seekers used, the same energy that once burned entire cities in the last war. He's not hiding anymore, Arca said, eyes wide with fear. He wants everyone to know. He's back. Jack gritted his teeth. I have to finish what I started before I even knew I started it that night. Jack and Arca traveled to an ancient archive hidden beneath the surface of Gravenox. It was said to be built by the first Starborn, a place where no one dared enter. But when Jack placed his hand on the door, it opened for him inside. The air was heavy with forgotten history, walls lined with symbols, books, and weapons from another age. In the center of the archive stood a giant mirror, not made of glass, but a living surface that shimmered like water. The memory gate, Arca said. If you enter it, you will see the full truth, your past, your death, your mistakes, and your purpose. Jack hesitated. What if I'm not ready? He asked. You don't have time to wait. She replied. He's already preparing to strike. Jack stepped forward and touched the mirror. The surface rippled and pulled him in. Inside the memory, time bent, he saw himself. As he once was, taller, stronger, wearing golden armor, he stood on a burning planet, the sword raised high. Fighting a figure in black, they clashed again and again, energy shaking the stars. But in the end, he lost. He made one mistake. He showed mercy. The Shadow Heir survived, sealed in dark space, but alive. Jack collapsed to his knees in the vision. The old version of him looked down at him and said, You get one more chance, this time. Finish it, or everything dies. Jack was thrown back out of the mirror, landing in the archive, breathing hard. Arca rushed to him. What did you see? Jack stood up slowly, eyes glowing again, his voice calm. I saw how I failed. And now I know how to win. The wind on Gravenox had changed. It howled now like a storm, but like the planet itself, was afraid. Every living thing could feel it in the air. The Shadow Heir was awake, and something terrible was coming. Deep in the ruins of the old city, Jack Carter stood on a broken watchtower, looking down at the land he never meant to be part of. But it wasn't just his anymore. It was calling. To him, everything was. Arca stepped beside him, her face hard, her eyes glowing faintly from the energy storms overhead. The council is broken, she said. Half of them fled, and the other half now serve him. Jack didn't look at her. I have to go back, he said. To the temple. Arca blinked. It's suicide. He controls it now. It's his fortress. Jack finally looked at her. Then that's where I end this. They left at dawn, cutting across the old mining routes that led through the crystal canyons. Jack wore a cloak to hide the blue energy still leaking from his hands. The sword wasn't at his side because it was inside him now. After entering the memory gate, he was no longer just carrying the weapon, he was bonded with it. Its voice spoke softly in his thoughts now. Not as words, but feelings, like fire wrapped in purpose as they neared the temple's outer walls. They saw the changes, no longer peaceful ruins. The structure had transformed into a black fortress. Giant banners hung from the towers, marked with a red spiral symbol of the shadow heir. Dark machines floated through the air like vultures. Scanning everything, dozens of seekers marched in perfect silence across the grounds, and in the center stood the sword's old stone platform now, cracked and smoking. Jack narrowed his eyes. He corrupted it. He whispered, twisted it with his power. Arca placed a hand on his shoulder, then make it pure again. They moved through the shadows, using forgotten tunnels Arca remembered from her time as a priestess apprentice. One path led directly beneath the sword chamber as they crept through. The ground vibrated with strange pulses, like the heart of the planet was reacting to Jack's presence. Suddenly, they stopped. Two seekers stood in their path. Before Jack could move, Arca leaped forward. Striking first, her spear crackled with white energy as she fought like a storm, dancing between the armored killers. Jack backed her up, raising his hand and unleashing short bursts of blue flame that knocked one seeker into the wall. But they were too loud. A deep alarm rang across the temple, along low hum that shook the stones. The sky above the chamber turned blood red. He knew who was coming now, the shadow heir. Jack whispered, "He knows I'm here." They reached the main hall, wide and empty, like a grave. The broken swordstone sat in the middle, scorched black and steaming. The walls glowed red, and the air was hot with unnatural heat. Then he arrived. A figure floated down from the ceiling, tall, cloaked in smoke, wearing armor blacker than night. The steel mask on his face hid whatever he once was, but Jack knew that thing had once been a man, just like him, once a guardian, now twisted by the same power he had tried to control. The shadow heir touched the broken stone with his clawed hand. "So," he said, voice deep and echoing like a void, "the sword sings again. And it chose you." Jack stepped forward. "I was the last one to stop you. Now, I'm the last one to finish it." The shadow heir raised a hand, and red lightning struck the floor. The room exploded into chaos as seekers stormed in from all sides. Arca fought them at the door, holding the line alone. Jack walked slowly to the center of the room. "I don't need the blade to stop you," the shadow heir said. "I've already taken everything it gave you last time." Jack smiled. Not everything. He closed his eyes, and the energy inside him exploded. The sword's full power awakened. Blue light poured from his chest, his arms, his eyes. Pieces of armor formed around him in midder white, silver, glowing with the memory of stars. It wrapped around him like destiny itself was dressing him for battle, and in his right hand, the blade appeared, not summoned, not carried. Reborn, the shadow heir's body crackled with red power, and the final battle began. They clashed like two gods in a dying world. Jack's strikes were precise and powerful. Driven by old skill and new rage, the shadow heir fought like a storm of hate, faster than any I could follow. Walls cracked, pillars fell, and the temple began to collapse under their fury. Arca screamed as the ceiling above her caved in, and Jack turned for a moment, just long enough for the shadow heir to strike him in the chest. Jack flew across the room, hitting the wall hard, his armor sparking. The shadow heir walked toward him, blade glowing red with a deadly charge. "You're still weak," he growled. "Still human?" Jack coughed blood and smiled. "No," he whispered, standing again, sword trembling with light. "I'm both now the man I was and the man I became." The room shook again, louder than before. The sword in Jack's hand began to hum a final song. And Jack raised it high, ready to end what he started long ago. The sky above Gravenox was splitting open. Lightning cracked in strange shapes like burning letters across the stars. The temple shook, piece by piece, crumbling into dust. And in its heart, two powers clashed, one forged from rage, the other from memory. The Shadow Heir's red lightning met Jack Carter's blue fire as their blades screamed through the air. The room glowed with pulses of energy too bright for most to look at. Arca, injured but alive, crawled to safety behind a fallen pillar. Her eyes never leaving the battle. Jack wasn't fighting like a man anymore. He fought like he'd done. This before in another life, on another world. He was no longer just Jack Carter. He was Starborn. But the Shadow Heir would not fall easily. I was your brother once. The dark voice roared. We were protectors together. But you chose death, I chose power. Their swords struck again, sending shockwaves across the broken chamber. Jack's armor cracked at the shoulder, and he staggered, but he held the blade tighter. No, he said quietly. You chose fear. You were afraid the galaxy would forget you, so you tried to control it. The Shadow Heir let out a scream that wasn't just angry, it was pain. Then why did the sword abandon? Me? He shouted. Because it saw who you became, Jack said, and who I still am. The Shadow Heir raised both arms, drawing power from the skies themselves. Red bolts crashed down around him, corrupt energy feeding into his body. He became huge, twisted, almost more monster than man. But Jack stood calm. He looked down at the sword in his hand and whispered, Let's end this. The blade responded, glowing hotter than ever before. Blue fire circled Jack. Rising around him like wings, he charged forward one last time. The two forces met at the center of the room, red hate versus blue hope. The explosion tore through the air, shaking the land, lighting the sky like a second sun. And then? Silence, only smoke, broken stone, and ash remained. Arca limped forward, coughing, eyes searching the wreckage. Jack. She called out. No answer. She climbed over debris, calling again, Jack. Still nothing. She dropped to her knees, heartbreaking. Had he sacrificed himself? Again. But then the smoke parted from the center of the destroyed chamber. A figure walked out. His cloak was torn, his armor scorched, but his eyes? They still glowed blue. Jack stood tall. The sword, now a part of his right arm, fused into the skin like living light. The Shadow Heir was gone, his body turned to dust, his rage erased from the stars. It's over, Jack said, voice tired but steady. Arca smiled through her tears. You did it? In the weeks that followed, the red clouds faded. The storms stopped. The Seekers vanished without their master. They lost their purpose. Alien tribes came out of hiding. The priestess returned and bowed before Jack. The sword has passed its test, she said, and you have become legend. But Jack refused the crown. He didn't want to rule. Instead, he helped rebuild, fixing broken towers, clearing debris, and restoring the memory halls. He taught the people what he remembered from before. Unity, not fear. One evening, as the stars returned to peace, Arca joined Jack on the same broken tower where it all began. You could be king, she said softly. I'd rather be useful, he replied, smiling. She chuckled, still the same Jack. He looked up at the stars. I think it's time Earth remembers what it forgot. He said, there are other Starborn out there. The sword chose me, but I won't be the last. Arca nodded then. Let's find them together, far away, across the galaxy. On a quiet moon orbiting a blue gas giant. A young alien child touched a strange rock in a forgotten cave. It glowed faintly at first. Then brighter, from inside the stone, a sword-shaped light shimmered briefly and vanished. Somewhere, the wind whispered, "Another is awakening." The legend of Jack Carter, the human who lifted the sword when no alien could, had become the beginning of a new age, a story passed down across planets, a tale told in every tongue, not as a warning, but as a hope. The new starborn era had begun. Asterisk.